Hello, Doug and Scott and Joel and also Doug Krieger and Chris and John Luca. I want us to do a little video as an addendum to what the four of us did last night on Doug's Prophecy Roundtable on the Mystery Bozrah story. It seemed to me that we covered things pretty well, except for the issue of the breaker of Micah chapter 2, which I think is extremely exciting, engaging, and full of hope and full of romance about the return of Messiah at the end of the age. We didn't really discuss what he was doing when he came to Bozrah. We seem to see the issue of the blood on the garments and Ezekiel 63, Isaiah 63 and Ezekiel 20, but we didn't home in on why he's coming to Bozrah, what he's going to do there, how that's part of the end time story. He's coming to the tents of Judah in this Bozrah place, as well as being with his defenders of Jerusalem, the Jewish defenders of Jerusalem. So there's two Judah stories at the very end of the age, one that relates to the tents and the other that relates to the defenders of Jerusalem. So if we look at Zechariah chapter 12, we can see that there's mention of the tents there and also the defenders of Jerusalem. So anyway, I'm going to just go ahead and do a screen share here, and we'll look at the article I did years ago on the Bozrah story and the Bozrah exile, basically. And there's on the right-hand side of that article, by the way, this endtimepilgrim.org/Bozexile, B-O-Z exile.htm, if you want to go to this page. And then on the right side are all the related articles: the Desert of the Nations, Wilderness of the People, Woman of Revelation chapter 12, the Bozrah Deliverance, which is what I wanted to really emphasize today. We'll come to that, back to that in a minute. And the airlift to Bozrah, the fact that it may be more than metaphorical. It may actually be a true airlift, as we see here with this picture of the airliner. It's not going to be trains as happened in the past. You know, get on the train. We're going to take you to resettlement, work camps. Yeah, okay. The powers of darkness have their idea as to where these people are going, and they're fully on board and they're financing the thing. But God has his plan as to what he's going to be doing here. So it's almost like a big drama of the latter days in which God is allowing the powers of darkness to do what they're doing, of taking God's people away. And they're not having to worry about, oh, I got to save up money for the trip to Bozrah. Okay, no, you don't have to worry. It's all going to be provided because it says so in Revelation chapter 12. The woman is given the wings of a great eagle, and she is provided passage to the ultimate mystery Bozrah. And last night we did talk about the fact that there may be elements of this transition to the eventual mystery Bozrah, the big story of Micah chapter 2 and the coming of the breaker at the end. But in the early stages, it may be just, as Jesus said, look, when you are persecuted in one city, you flee to another. But maybe there's options for you to advance along your passage if you are owned. Remember, the birth certificate is all written in capital letters. So eventually, after the ruin of Joseph, by the time we get to the second half of the final 7 years, the Joseph people will have run out of money and liquidation options because they're not going to be doing business in 666. So that's where the crunch is going to occur in the latter half of the 70th week. And so we are looking at passage here. This passage is probably at the very end, going to this big mystery Bozrah place at the end of the age. And so I have some thoughts about where that is, but I'm not allowed to talk about it publicly. So it's a big, wonderful story. And we did mention last night about the fact that, well, let's go down to the scripture here. I wonder how I can make this bigger here. I will surely assemble all of you, Jacob. Let me see if I can make this bigger. Maybe not. I will surely assemble all of you, Jacob. I will gather the remnant of Israel. And so there's mention of a Jacob to Israel transition, which we discussed last night. I will put them together as the sheep of Bozrah. So that's, and the mention of Bozrah has been taken out of our new translations, but it is there, and it is a very, very important information that they plucked out. Bozrah is an Edomite territory. That's your big Edomite connection right there. Very, very important, because it says in Daniel 7 that Edom will escape out of the hands of the Antichrist. In other words, the Antichrist won't even muck around with the Edomites. The Antichrist is not really focused on the Edomites. He said, look, let them do what they want to do. And so Esau has still got his grudge with Judah, with Jacob. And so that drama that we saw prefigured in the life of the patriarch after he wrestled with the angel, he had to go and meet Esau, right? And then he was humbled and broken by that time. So we're looking here at a haughty Jacob at the beginning of the 70th week, and then at the end, he's not haughty at all. He is broken, and he is now fully in the hand of Messiah, ready to join with Judah in the stick. There's going to be the wonderful basis for ministry and judgment, righteous rule in the millennium to come. So here we have, as a flock in the midst of the pasture, they will throng with people. Now, in the King James, it says they will make great noise by virtue of the multitude of men. So this translation doesn't really bring that point out, but the business of making great noise means that they are engaged in conversation. Now, that means that they're doing yeshivas, they're doing midrashes, they're doing Bible conversations. And there's also a great revival going. This always happens in great revivals, great awakenings. There's lots of chatter outside of the chatter that comes, the noise that comes from the pulpit and the big amplifiers that are turned up when the Holy Spirit goes down, right? If the Holy Spirit's not present, turn up the amplifiers, okay? And then get the rah, rah, rah going. Well, that's still of the flesh, right? So we are looking here at a great throng of people, a huge multitude, and they're making great noise by virtue of the multitude of men. So that is the story there. And then we come down here. We discussed Ezekiel 20 last night quite well. Scott really hammered that point home very well, about I will rule over you. I will bring you out from the people, gather you out of the countries with a mighty hand, with stretched out arm, with fury poured out. In other words, God is going to be grabbing his people with some degree of zeal to do something with them. And so it's almost like a school teacher returning to a noisy classroom after an absence and finding out the classroom is in uproar, in disarray. And so he comes in and he says, okay, you lot, I'm going to do something with the, I'm going to do something with you that you didn't expect. In other words, you've been seeing the fishes at work in ministry, even from going back to Peter. I'll make you fishers of men, but the day will come when I will say, look, I'm going to leave off from the fishes, because there will be no nice enticing of people to try Jesus anymore. It will be God saying, look, I'm going to hunt you down, and I'm going to gather you to do something with you, because I love you, and you at the moment are not coming to me through the fishes to the degree that I would like to see you come to me. And so even as we discussed with Gomer, she is redeemed. Hosea comes and he buys her. She's on the slave block. And then he redeems her, but he's still not finished. He says, he's going to put her away to a place for a while until she comes into the valley of Achor, right? In Hosea, it mentions that, the valley of troubling. And that is going to become a doorway of hope for her. Well, that's pretty wonderful, isn't it? In other words, the pre-tribbers have written all this off as a complete and total black chamber of horrors. Nothing good can happen. You can't be there, so you don't take responsibility there. But for post-tribbers, we are taking responsibility. We are the commissioned officers. The pre-tribbers are non-commissioned officers because they haven't embraced the commission. The commission is, I'll be with you to the end of the age. They said, no, we're leaving before the end of the age. We're copping out. We're doing like the Acts 27 shipwreck of the Apostle Paul. We're nicking off on the special boat away from the stormy shore. We're going to nick off. We're going to go to shore. If the ship's coming in, we ain't going to be here. If there's going to be a shipwreck, we don't want that. We want a nice end time arrival with a special separate lifeboat, a dispensational lifeboat. And Paul says to the captain, unless this crew stays on board, we can't all be saved. In other words, they have a responsibility to save the people on that ship. And as we see, the angel Gabriel comes to Paul in the middle of the shipwreck, and he says, fear not, Paul, God has given you the lives of all who sail with you. So, so this commissioning of God's covenant people is where post-tribbers come in. The others officers are important, and they do a wonderful job, but they're not commissioned. They're non-commissioned officers. They're tactical officers. They're not strategic officers. And so we need to understand that we've been highly privileged as post-tribbers not to run away in a cave in Idaho, but I should be looking at the camera, I'm sorry. Not to run away at a cave in Idaho, but to take responsibility to be a light to the Gentiles. That's what the Great Commission in the Old Testament is all about. In Isaiah 49, God says, look, I've commissioned you as my servant. And people say, oh, he's talking about Israel. Oh, we're not responsible. Now, look, they say, oh, Jesus is a servant. Okay, we're not responsible. Look, we are in union with Christ, right? Here's the head, we are the body. So God is talking to both the head and the body there as his servant. And we need to take responsibility in that. And then when we do take responsibility, suddenly the scriptures start to make sense here. And we can see that call in the Great Commission in Isaiah 49, he said, look, it's a small thing to restore all 12 tribes, but I have commissioned you, and this is the Great Commission in the Old Testament, I've commissioned you to be a light to the heathen, to the ends of the age. So, and then in the New Testament, Jesus talks about the fact that he has commissioned us, and he's made us, he's authorized us. Yeah, authority is what Doug has been focusing on lately. He's authorized his covenant people to tread on serpents and scorpions and to take some of the judgment elements that is in Judah to heart and say, look, we've got some power here based upon the authority that's given to us, which is what we actually want as Christians. We're jealous of Judah having that authority as in the royal house, but if Jesus comes into our heart, he brings Judah inside us too, and we suddenly are lawful people instead of a bunch of rabble, carnal people who are looking for blood covenant in all the wrong places. So here it is, we've got a wonderful promise of a great revival, a great awakening in the latter days, and it's going to be happening in the place of God's sequestering of his people. Meanwhile, back in the world, there's a famine of the hearing of the word of God because They pulled God's covenant people, the Judeo-Christian people, out because the New World Order does not want any chatter about a coming Messiah. So, man, I keep looking at the wrong place here. Okay, so here we come to the Bozrah story about the breaker, and I think it's down here. Yes, okay, and this is okay, verse 13. He who breaks open the way goes up before them. Okay, I don't really like that particular rendition. It should be more like what the King James says. The breaker has come up before. In other words, this is sort of a generic, he who breaks open the way. No, the breaker has come up before them. They break through the gate and go out, and their king passes before them with the Lord at their head. So this is the breaker coming to Bozrah. It's a magnificent story. And here's the King James version here. The breaker has come up before them. They have broken up. They have passed through the gate and are gone out by it, the gate, the door, Jesus, the way. And their king shall pass before them, and the Lord on the head of them. So the king, and by the time they see the breaker this time, he's a king. He's not just a high priest for their redemption and salvation. He's also their king. So this is the kingdom coming at the end of the age. The kingdom comes. Thy will be done. Thy kingdom come. This is the kingdom coming. Okay, so there we have the Bozrah story, and then we talked about Petra. Yacked on about Bozrah. I was trying to talk about Petra last night. Petra is not. Let me see if I got Petra here. The place of refuge in the latter days. Okay, we've got options as to where the refuge is in the latter days. People want to talk about a refuge, but we as post-tribbers are not really filling out this story. We're not telling the story as well as we might. But here we have the four options for us to think about what is going to happen to God's covenant people as they approach the end time. They can become survivalists, thinking about me and my soybeans, my rifle, my security. Hey, you're coming into my sovereign space. Christians talking about being a sovereign citizen. That's a joke. We're not sovereign citizens. We are citizens of the kingdom of God, the Commonwealth of Israel. That's a big deal. We need to be able to see people come into an understanding of that story. And then the other thing is, where else is a refuge to be found? Well, it's spiritual. He who shelters in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Psalm 91. Wonderful promise there. And then the other question is it in Petra? Is this refuge in Petra? And I believe the answer is decidedly no. That will be a war zone. It'll be dangerous. And one fuel bomb will suck all the air out of there. Gas bomb will gas everybody in that area. It's in the war zone. It's impossible for people to find any shelter or safety in this waterless canyon. It was well defended in the time of the Nabateans and the earlier peoples, and it would not be well defended now. They could defend the narrow passages with bow and arrow quite well. An army couldn't rush in on Petra in the old days, but now from the air, they certainly can, can't they? So the other thing is, as we look at Petra, there's evidence of pre-flood or maybe post-flood activity here with high-tech rock cutting and so forth. This wasn't done by people with a whole bunch of chisels. That's nonsense. It's complete. Brian Forster has got a number of YouTube articles on Petra, and he brings out the fact that just like other places in the world where there's big evidences of high tech, here's another example of it here. Perhaps in the days of Nimrod, after the flood. There was still some information coming to people in the giants and Nephilim about high tech, that they could do certain things, and that was lost at some point. So it wasn't all just lost in the flood. Maybe there was some remnants of it left over to do this sort of rock cutting after the flood. So this was obviously done after the flood, because you can see where the flood waters went through here, and then there's activity on those rock faces after the flood. So this is post-flood high tech here in Petra. So Brian Forster has got a number of YouTubes on that. So now the other thing I wanted to bring out was the breaker, and how it's featured. Is featured in the the Runaway Bride, and it's Petra here again. And then there's these. This is the Seek, the entry into Petra here, and it shows evidence of huge floodwater flows through here. And then we see these rock walls are being worked on by post-flood entities of some sort in the days of Nimrod, I would suspect. But Doug Hamp would have some more things to say about that. And then we've got the sheepfold and the breaker coming in, and there's, look, the sheep are in their sheepfold, and then the breaker's coming in. He's the door. He sits at the door, and he is the door of the sheepfold. And he comes and breaks them out, and they all disappear out, and they're going out through a portal. And here we have God's redemption story of this breakout, written in the stars and discussed by the shepherds in the field and the patriarchs in days gone by. I do believe that a lot of these stars were named by Adam, perhaps, or maybe maybe after that. I don't really know. But we've got the Little Dipper here in the inside the folds of Draco, which is a picture of Satan. And here we've got the Big Dipper over here. So if we look at where if we lay on the North Pole and look straight up, we would see, right nowadays, here in 2008, we'd see pretty much the Polaris, the turning star. But back in the days of Abraham, when Abraham left Ur, and if he went to the North Pole and looked straight up, he would see Draco. And that star has probably got a special name, but there's two books written about this, God's message in the stars, in the last century, one by Zeiss and the other by, I've got them in my library, another by, I can't remember his name at the moment. But here we have, if we look closely at the Lesser Sheepfold here, which is the old name for the Little Dipper, we can see that there's a sheepfold here, but then we can see the breakout, which is the handle of the Little Dipper. And at the head of the breakout is Polaris, who is the turning star, the one upon the star upon which all the other stars are turning right now, as we come to the close of the age. That story has been written in the heavens. It says the heavens declare the glory of God. And people say, oh yes, aren't they beautiful, the stars? Yeah, that's true. But they're also telling a story. They're declaring the glory of God in his story. So all the stars, the Mazzaroth, are telling a story. My friend from days gone by, Tim Warner, has got a wonderful section on his website on the Mazzaroth. You can probably just Google that and find it. Big stories of God's redemption, Virgo, the woman of Revelation chapter 12. We saw that back in 2017 with all the pre-tribbers gathering around Scotty. What Scotty said about this coming fall, you know, is this going to be rapture time with the virgin, you know? So, well, it wasn't. So, in any case, the breaker, yeah. For unto Zion comes a deliverer in the year of Jubilee. So if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see a YouTube on the, if you just go to youtube.com/user/Gavin Finlay, you'll see the video I made about the Day of Atonement and the Jubilee of Messiah and the music associated with that. Awake, O Israel, and ending your slumber, and you're ending your slumber, and the truth will set you free. For unto Zion comes a deliverer in the year of Jubilee. So there we have the end of the 70 weeks of Daniel, which is going to do all those 6 things that Daniel says in Daniel 9 to wrap up everything. And the Day of Atonement is number 3 on the list, as we discussed last time. And it is a wonderful promise of the breaker coming as a deliverer. So that's part of the story of Isaiah 63, when he is coming from Bozrah after doing business there in Bozrah. And he is he's angry. As in zeal with he is angry about his people, yes, as Scott says, but also at the end, when his people have been subdued and they're in the valley of Achor, and it's now become a door of hope for them, and they are all refined, and the gold is refined, you know, like the old miner who's refining gold. And he and people are gathering around. They say, and he's got gold in the furnace, and he's skimming off the slag at the top. And then he turns up the fire and skims off the slag at the top, the slag at the top. And so the people gather around and say, how do you know that the refining is complete? And the old miner turns to them and says, I know when the refining is complete, when I look down into the gold and I see my face reflected in the gold. So isn't that a beautiful story, eh? About how there's a purpose for all this wonderful refining that goes on at the end of the day. It's not all bad. It's not all just, oh, it's painful, we can't be there. Look, that is an NCO response, or that is the NCO is concerned about what the people think. The wagon master is concerned about what's going on in the conversation in the wagons. The mountain men are concerned about bringing the people through the mountains to where they're supposed to go. So that's our responsibility, is to provide waypoints to show the way through, just like Daniel Boone and John Finlay took 30 axemen and they made a way through the Cumberland Gap so that people can get through. We've got to have that spirit of, we've got to provide a way, we've got to provide good information so that people can understand what they're about, what their calling is, the divine calling, the adventure of the latter days, and the romance, because God is wooing his people. Even in the trials, he's wooing his people. And what do we see? Love and war. We see that theme time and time again. Hollywood capitalizes upon it. We see this romance of God in the time of trial. We see it with Dr. Zhivago. We see it with War and Peace. We see it with all the movies. There's a wonderful Italian movie I showed with John. I sent to John Luke about love and war. About an English commando that was captured on the beaches of Anzio in Italy, and his story, and it's a love story. It's a beautiful story. Love and war go together. Okay, so we can't allow fear to trump faith in this story, and it's a devotion story first and foremost. So anyway, that's my little rave for today, and about the breaker, and he's coming to his break. And this is not the thing to do. This is where 2/3 of the people are going to die, because they're going to fight for their traditions, their Constantinian traditions, which have been very wonderful, but they're not going to take us through. In other words, God's saying, look, I'm taking you beyond the Constantinian game of church and state, politics and religion. I'm taking you beyond the covering that has been provided by the European princes, the merchants, and the popes, the political leaders that we like, even dear Donald Trump. Look, I'm taking you beyond Donald Trump to me. And that's what Yom Teruah is all about. We discussed last week. God is saying, look, at the beginning of the 70th week, I'm calling you to me. And that's the big story, not the fact that there's Daniel 9:27, New World Order. Oh, how terrible. Oh, it's bad. No, yeah, it is bad. It is bad for people who are going to have to deal with that, and they want to save something that can't be saved. And they're gonna lie down with a gun in their hand, like Elvis Presley's song, and die, or they're going to go to the cave in Idaho and then end up being blasted, the cave entrance, with a Hellfire missile. Then they're in the dark as troglodytes with their soybeans. What witness are they going to be to Messiah at the end of the age in a cave in the blackness as troglodytes and sitting there with their soybeans and their poop? Now, let me ask you that. Is that where you want to end your life? So, we need to challenge people with these things. This message will save the lives of many and bring people around to understanding that God is calling them beyond the church state, their alliance with the defenders of the faith. They can't be a damsel in distress saying, oh, please save me, Mr. Trump, or please save me, Napoleon, or please save me, Mr. Pope, or the British Empire. Please save me, the Victoria Cross winners. Oh yeah, fighting against those. Bring it in the empire, of the British Empire. God says, look, no. After 2 world wars, that's the end of your empire. The Brits understand that. As a British subject, I understand what happened there. The Americans still don't. They still think that they can save America right on up into the end of the age. They need to know that they can't save America. Once that Daniel 9:27 accord occurs and God begins his determined dealings with his people one more time in the 70 weeks prophecy, this is the 70th week, then that is all over. You cannot continue with an old rag of the flags of the past and the hex on the Star of Israel. The new flag of Israel will be a menorah. It won't be the hex. It ain't going to be that old number 6 of man pointed star. It's going to be something more wonderful than that. So, by the way, there's a 7-pointed star on the flag of Australia, which is interesting. And also on this flag of Australia, there's the Southern Cross, which is interesting too. Well, that's that. And then there's the great Southern fish. Oh, anyway, I'm diverting from the story here. So basically, we've got all sorts of wonderful things to share about the Bozrah exile and the deliverance at the end and the breaker coming. The breaker is our Messiah, and he is coming. And it says that the sheepfold at the end, the sheepfold of the Almighty, is going to throng with people. They'll make great noise, and there's obviously going to be a huge awakening revival in these camp meetings, even though the men are going to be separated from the women, because it says so in Zechariah 12, because it says that the women will be repenting and getting saved separate from the men. Okay, I don't know what to do with that scripture other than to say, look, it would seem to me that this end time tent situation is going to be men and women in separate camps. But that's where the revival is going to be. And now, think about this too. The powers of darkness know that shedding of innocent blood is bad for them. They know that that's going to be bad for them in the second heaven, because Michael is going to absolutely pummel them over that issue of the innocent blood. So they're saying to themselves, how can we get rid of this conversation, this yak about a coming Messiah, and this call to evangelical devotion instead of the devotion to the penis symbol that Scott talked about, the phalanx, the Nimrod thing, the Washington Monument, the dome, the big penis dome in Rome at the where the Pope makes his big presentation, opens a window, and there's a big dome there. Oh yeah. It's very carnal. So there's got to be something beyond that. God is calling his people beyond that to him. There's a devotion story here, and there's a big switch that occurs at the beginning of the final 7 years, and that's what the Yom Teruah is all about. Which we discussed last week, the awakening, the awakening blast. And God is saying, come to me. Do not go out of the streets to protest. You'll be killed, microwaved, shot, deafened, or made sick with some sort of thingamajig. So are you headed off, sweetie?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Are you talking to someone?
I'm making a little yak to some of my colleagues right now.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. So the big end time story here is just it's just marvelous beyond all telling. It's full of romance, adventure. There's a Hosea story with the love story of him and Gomer. There's Joseph with his brothers. Oh my! I mean, the Joseph with his brothers story. I mean, there's a huge raft of conversations there. But basically what I wanted to do in drawing in all my beloved colleagues in this matter is to help to feed you, because you're writing the books. I've been roped into doing some writing for books, and Doug Krieger has asked me to write a book. But I would prefer at this moment just to bring this information to you, because you guys are the movers and shakers in this whole movement. And I want to help you. I want to help you to write your books. Doug's writing a book both Dougs are writing books like crazy. Scott's going to get around to doing one pretty soon. John Luke has written a wonderful book. Peter is involved in his ministry in Vineyard. And so we are all starting to talk about something that's an emerging, big, breaking story. And I do believe that God has entrusted this to us, because I'm looking around the world to see if anybody's telling that story. This story, I don't see it. I really don't. We're seeing the 12 tribes. We're seeing Arnold Fruchtenbaum. We're seeing David Stern. We're seeing Perry Stone. None of these guys are homing in on the details of what is going to be happening and what our responsibility is and what God is calling us to do, and how the feasts fall in to bracket, I believe, the final 7 years of the age. So that's about all I'm going to say this morning. I wanted to just bring out this issue of the breaker, which we didn't discuss yesterday. And well, blessings to all of you. I'm going to send this to Scott and to Joel and to Dr. Doug, I was on with last night, and also to the Kriegermeister, and also to John Luca, and to Peter Weeb, and to Gary Poisson in Atlanta, and anybody else I can think of that may be interested in this. I think Steve Stars is in on this as well, and there's some others coming in that I really need to make a little list of, so I can share these things with them, because they are in ministry. Some of them are writing books. Some of them have written to me, look, I'm writing a book, can you help me? Well, I want to do that as much as I possibly can, because I just see myself as like one of the mountain men, you know. I'm just an early explorer, but I don't have time to go back to Missouri and to tell everybody back in Missouri what's going on. I want you guys to write the books to the guidebooks to the end times, the guidebooks to the mountains, for the people in the wagon trains as they come up to the mountains and the passes, to know where to go and to be happy about the glorious things that they're going to see as they come to the end of the age. So anyway, that's my little yak for the day, and I'm going to go ahead and close out this now, and that'll be it, I think. Oh my. I think I've closed it, haven't I? Okay, that's it. Stop sharing. Finally found it. Stop sharing. End meeting.